Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Tina to our event. She and I are going to have a conversation. This is one of our fireside chats about overcoming burnout. Both of us have experienced it, so we'll share a little bit of our backgrounds and how we experience burnout, but more importantly, how do you recognize it and then what can you do about it? If you stay to the end, I have a handout that comes from our burnout prevention certification that lists things to look out for and the difference between burnout and potentially other things that you may be experiencing. So I'm going to be adding that to the chat for those of you who are here for our talk. So Tina, before we dive in, would you mind introducing yourself to our participants?
Absolutely. So my name is Tina Ullmann. I am the owner and founder of Vireo HR Advisory. I have been in the HR space for over 27 years, growing from a generalist up through VP roles. So just continued growth within my career. And went out and started my own advisory and consulting business this year. So
And
it's
as you
been a
mentioned,
whirlwind.
you're in Connecticut.
And I'm in Connecticut, the East Coast.
So let's talk a little bit about, our burnout story. So when was it that you realized that you had burnout?
So for me, I realized it when I actually hit a wall and not physically, but almost, right? From one of those instances where I couldn't stop crying every Sunday for months, and just kept thinking, I don't know what's going on. I was doing meditation, I was doing massages every Sunday, and then I'd still go home and cry like every Sunday night and didn't realize it for quite some time because you hold on to it for a while, right? And then I hit this wall where I just couldn't take it anymore and I had a breakdown and it was a mental health crisis. I immediately called a friend of mine who is a psychotherapist and she got me in touch with like tons of other people and I took a leave because it was at that point that I broke.
Mhm.
And when you break, it doesn't mean you're broken.
Mhm.
It just means that there's something there that you need to care for.
Yeah, for me, I also went to the point of breaking, went on leave. Uh, and what I really wish I would have paid attention to or been aware of is what are the signs I could have noticed
Yes.
earlier that I didn't have to push myself to the point of breaking.
Mhm.
Um, it didn't need to get that dire in order for me to say I need help. Um, how I knew it was time for me to get help, uh, it wasn't the breakdowns, it wasn't the crying, it wasn't, the experiencing several of the symptoms, which we can talk about. It was when I found out that my husband at the time and my mother were having meetings about my mental health without me. And when
Mm,
I caught wind of that, I
yeah,
realized that something needed to change.
that is definitely a big wake up call from that
Yeah.
perspective. I had a ton of people that just kept asking me if I was okay. Like, so it wasn't seeming like myself, but never realized the impact that it had. And to your point, when I look back at other things that like occurred 2, 3 years prior to that, I was like, oh, if I had just listened to some of these things that came up, I probably wouldn't have hit this wall that I hit
Hmm.
and
Exactly.
sought advice sooner.
So, what was your first reaction kind of when you realized that this was actually burnout?
So honestly, it was a conversation with my therapist at the time because I had never had anyone put it into perspective when I was explaining what was happening around like taking care of my well-being. I was meditating, I was doing Reiki, I was doing all of the things that I thought needed to be done to help maintain my well-being. I'd have people in my office doing meditation sessions just to calm my team down, right? So I was trying to do all the right things and then still crying every Sunday. So, like, when I was talking to my therapist about this, it was, oh, she's like, you had the Sunday scaries. And I was like, well, what? what is that? Right? Now
Yep.
I hear about it all the time. I'm like, well, I guess I did, but I didn't realize that that's what I had. So it was kind of the conversation with her explaining to me what burnout was and like what I was going through as they were helping me figure out my leave process too. That's when I had realized that I had actually been through this and it wasn't just, um, you know, something that just happens to me, that
Yeah.
it's something that a lot of us go through because as for HR, we take care of others. We don't necessarily take care of ourselves.
Can you say more about that? What do you think specifically within HR? And by the way, if anybody's interested, also as part of this event, you have access to an HR Wellbeing e-learning that does talk about this and the specific hazards to HR, as well as the session I did on Monday. But from your perspective, Tina, what are some things that are unique about HR that can increase our likelihood of experiencing burnout from your perspective?
Well, and I think it depends upon different roles in HR, right? Like so generalizing HR when there are so many different
Mhm.
roles and there are probably certain roles that experience a lot more of the challenges that our employees are facing on a regular basis, right? When you think about generalists and employee relations and investigations, and you think about those that work in the well-being space within HR that
Mhm.
handle our EAP benefits, and like are hearing about all of the issues that others are having, like the constant need to actually help people manage through crisis and trauma and individual challenges that happen within the business. It's not just business related. Like you are then that person's go-to person. And if you're like me, I am an empath. I don't, not all HRs are, but like I take on people's feelings, right? In that sense. And you have to find a way to get rid of them. But there are a lot of HR leaders that are like that. And then when you're taking all of that on and you're not able to release it and have somebody else that you can speak to about it because you're in a space of confidentiality and not sharing stories, right? Because it's a confidential space. So we take it on, we take it in, and then it goes nowhere because you may not want to burden your family, your friends with it. You don't have anyone at work that you can talk to about it because you're in that confidential space. So
Mhm.
how do you release the information that you're taking on that's continuously building up and festering within you?
Yeah, and they call that toxin handling,
Oh,
which
okay.
is yeah one of the things that uh, can be pretty popular, not popular, that's the wrong word, common in HR. Um, and I jokingly say, Toby from The Office.
Yeah.
Remember Toby from that kind
Yep.
of that transactional, no, the opposite of an empath, like kind of
Yes.
unfeeling, just kind of lost their will to live,
Yep.
stereotypical HR person. That's a person who has compassion fatigue. That's a person who
Yes.
came in high empathy, gave and gave and gave to the point of exhaustion. And when they didn't have anything left, had nothing left to give, that's when that compassion fatigue can happen. And that's when a switch kind of comes on where you kind of flip on people. It becomes like you don't have feeling, you don't have compassion, you don't have empathy for others. And interestingly, one of the three symptoms, the three symptoms of burnout, clinical symptoms of burnout are exhaustion, and that can be both physical and psychological exhaustion, um, comprehension or cognition, so your ability for your brain to actually function. But the other one is cynicism and the distrust in other people. And that kind of is how that shows up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like as you're talking through it, I'm like, yep, that's when this happened. Yes, this is when this happened. And in the end, the cynicism and the distrust was there, like in
Mhm.
full force. And like when you start to experience that, and that is not who you are, what people are used to seeing from you, it sets a completely different tone in conversations you have and how you build the relationships and how you continue to do your job effectively.
Yeah.
in that space.
Do you have a sense of what kind of the root cause was for you in getting to burnout, or was there one kind of big thing, or was it a culmination of a bunch of different things?
So I do think it was a culmination of a bunch of different things. When I really think about it, right, it it went back a few years. It just continued to build if I really think about it. And it was a lot of personal things happening as well as work things happening, transitioning into different roles. I do think COVID played a handle in that too, because of the amount that we had to take on as
Mhm.
HR professionals in that
Mhm.
space. So it just added to that piece of it. Um, but majority of it was not feeling as if I could be my true self,
Mm.
supporting organizations whose values did not necessarily align with mine. And
Interesting.
listening to that and listening to how I want to show up and how I know I can show up versus how I was showing up.
That's so we actually have a session on this, a panel on values conflict. It's so interesting you
Yes.
mentioned this, Tina. We didn't talk about this in the prep
No.
work, but that was part of my burnout was I was working for a CEO who didn't believe in DEI, right? Um, Not that anybody knows what that's like now. And I had to be the face to the employees around being an organization that cared about humans and in an industry that has one of the fourth highest incident of death by suicide, and that's 80% female, so highly empathetic industry. And here I was working with a CEO who didn't want to offer an EAP, who didn't want to, and this was at the peak of Black Lives Matter. This is 2020.
Wow. Yeah.
And so having to navigate that and be the face of it, it definitely had a factor in my burnout. The other piece for me was, and this has happened a couple times, not as bad as it was in this situation, where I was hired to be the strategic leader. I was the chief people officer, but then I was forced to do things like payroll and benefits. Not that those are bad things, but they ain't my strong suit. Like
Yeah.
I did my best, but my best at details is poor at is, I'd maybe get a C. I would give myself a
Yeah.
C in that area, even though I'm giving it everything I have. And and it just when you are working against your strengths, as we know, that can, create emotional and mental and psychological exhaustion.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I would talk a lot about as Hogan certified, right? Is that the
Hmm.
derailers that happen when you're under that stress or that burnout or not focusing on your strengths.
Hmm.
Like it's so important to just ensure that you're not staying in that space for a very long period of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, actually, since you mentioned Hogan, and it doesn't matter what assessment you use, we do predictive index and Hogan, but once you know what your strengths are, you need to really care for those or what your values
Yes.
are. In Hogan,
Yes.
in particular, why I like Hogan, and I'm going to nerd out about that right now, is
I'll
uh,
nerd with you on it.
okay, is that if we don't feed our values, and this is one of the things in my research that has been really helpful, is if we're clear about our purpose and values and we live those values, and we defend and protect them, it can bolster our mental health. It can be protective to our mental health so we don't do things like absorb the biases against HR. So, um, did you feel it in your case, with not living the values or there being values conflict? I mean, how did that show up for you?
So I think that was one of the things that I was trying to handle on my own, right? And it's not something that you can necessarily handle on your own because you're hearing about it from other leaders and that it's not aligning with them and you're having to kind of talk them through the process. And um it got to a point where I was like, wow, so many of us are through burnout and the team that I was in because it got to a point where my CHRO was even just like, it is what it is.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, but it's not good.
No.
What are we doing about it?
Right.
How can I do this? Right. So it's
Right.
having separate conversations when the ultimate feeling at a leadership level, an executive leadership level, was it is what it is. The CEO is going to do what he's going to do. We're just going to follow suit.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that that's when it just became really noticeable to me that I was like, there's times you can make change and impact, and there's times when you can't. And just having to follow suit is necessarily one of my key strengths because I'm a Jersey girl and I believe in radical transparency and candor. So, yeah, so that was pretty difficult for me. But I did it for a year before I actually experienced the burnout, and I was like, "This is not me. I'm, yeah." So,
Suppressing and
even
masking increases our exhaustion, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
It's
okay.
interesting because I
Go
have
ahead.
people
Sorry.
tell me today, like today, that I worked with last year, and we meet up still every now and then. You just seem so happy and different. I said, you never got to know the real me.
That's
I
right.
had to be somebody completely different.
Mhm.
So you never got to know the real me.
What's hard is for me too, I felt like I had to always dull my light,
Yes.
right? And so once I was able to just shine, I don't want to go back to it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so we've both been through burnout. We kind of have that realization. We both went out on medical leave to try to navigate that, both with clinical services. For myself, I was partially hospitalized for depression and PTSD, actually. And then, what was your road to recovery like? Like, how did you come back from? And would you say you're back from burnout now?
I would say now I am back from burnout. It has been almost 20 months,
Hmm.
right? But I would say now, at this moment, I feel as if I am back from burnout, but I am very well aware of what is happening within my mind and my body, and to be able to say, okay, I need to step away, right?
Hmm.
And take some time for myself. So it's very different. But my road to recovery was leveraging many different factors to help support my recovery from burnout. It was taking a leave that was absolutely needed. It was having a therapist that I could confide in and help me pull myself out of it to understand that who I was again and help me refine myself. There was meditation, there was travel because the beach was someplace that actually I feel like grounded when I'm in the sand, right? And that was something that I couldn't do in February in Connecticut. So to go someplace else to do that. Um, it was leveraging my family and my support system around me that not everybody has. I am lucky to have a very strong family support system and friendship support system of people that have experienced similar things. Um, but the biggest thing for me was the therapy, and then the the work on myself through art, my therapy discussions and art therapy,
Mm.
um, making sure that I actually like I would put post like write with a marker on the mirrors in my bedroom, in my bathroom, in my office about who I am, what I stand for, and just make sure that I was having those affirmations with myself every day and those conversations.
So, what are some skills or some techniques that you would recommend for other people that worked for you? It sounds like writing those affirmations. Welcome, Sarah. We're gonna get started with your session in about 10 minutes. You
Hi, no worries.
feel free to just sit still while we wrap up our session on burnout. But what are some other tips you have, Tina, for folks who may be experiencing burnout or be on the cusp?
So I think First thing is making sure that you're taking some time for yourself because we tend not to do that, right? So if you have PTO, take your PTO. If you're already experiencing stuff, then talk to a doctor, talk about whether or not any options are there for you in terms of a leave, if that's possible. But the biggest thing you can do for yourself is look yourself in the mirror. I think personally, look yourself in the mirror and remind yourself that you know your stuff, that you are strong, and that you are able to be successful. And I think when you're going through burnout, it breaks you to a point where you start to question everything that you're doing and whether or not you have this imposter syndrome or whether or not you are truly successful in your career, right? Or where you want to go with your career. So start to identify with whatever works best for you, whether that's reading, whether it's art therapy, whether it's writing. Like find something that you are passionate about and make sure that you're doing that and making that a priority for yourself outside of everything else. Find 1 hour or 2 hours a week to do something that you're passionate about, no matter what it is, without any other distractions. That in itself will help.
I call that taking a selfish. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show
No.
Schitt's Creek. They
Oh, I
talk
love
about,
Schitt's Creek. Yeah.
right. One of the early episodes, they talk about taking a selfish. So, because so often when we say, oh, I'm going to take some time for myself or I'm taking a day off, we use it to catch up on things, which you may say, and I know I would have said, well, that helps me feel more relaxed and less stressed because I've gotten all these tasks done. But that's not an investment in me.
No.
And so like you do art therapy, I write poetry, I do photography. I mean, whatever the thing is that goofy thing that the 15-year-old version of you got joy from, spend some time doing that, whatever that might be. And taking a selfish. So that's one of the things I recommend. And then anybody who's ever heard me talk will hear me talk about these two very powerful things that we need to do for ourselves, and that is self compassion and acceptance. And so I think speaking to yourself with kindness, like Tina said, looking in the mirror, you have to believe it. But imagine, and what I do is, what would someone who loves me say? Or if this was happening to someone I love, what would I say to them? Start replacing that internal dialogue, those things we would never say to another human being that we say to ourselves. Start replacing those talk tracks. The rest of the world can criticize you. That's outside of your control, which takes me to acceptance, which is accepting that there are going to be executives that are never going to see the value in what you do, no matter what you do. There are
Yeah.
going to be executives who don't believe in DEI, who don't believe in the human side of work, who don't support the work that you do and want you to go back to the administrative closet. Um, that's not because you failed. That's just a that's just a failure on their part. And I think too often in HR we gaslight ourselves because we absorb the bias that
Yes.
exists about HR. And when we can get back to our values, we're therefore better able to navigate those situations in a more healthy and productive way. That's my TED talk on self-compassion
Absolutely.
and acceptance. Okay, so let me last
I have a
question, and I want to
question.
wrap up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if taking a sabbatical in PTO is looked down upon, how can you change that perspective and communicate right with the bosses about that?
So in some organizations, I know that this is actually very rampant, right? In terms of taking your PTO, but taking the PTO is important. You may not ever change someone's perspective on it if there's somebody that doesn't take it for themselves, right? But it's around making sure that you're still leading the way by taking that PTO time, doing something to recharge, like Dr. Al mentioned, because just taking it to get a whole bunch of other tasks completed is still going to drain you. Do something that's going to recharge you, and then they'll see the benefit of it and how you come back and are able to get the work done at a higher level of intensity, even.
And maybe they won't. and that's not
And
your
maybe they won't.
responsibility,
Yeah, that's
and
okay
that's
too.
also not your responsibility. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I think has been helpful for me in understanding what's important to me is, who am I here for? Am I here for that executive that's judging me, and no matter what I do, it's not going to make them happy anyway? Or am I here for me and my family? And so um, who are you here for? What are you here to do? It's not
Yeah.
necessarily to respond to Bob's emails in
Yep.
5 minutes. That's just a falsehood that we get in. If you stepped away from the job tomorrow, that stuff wouldn't matter anymore. And
Exactly.
so I think being clear about that is important. All right, couple things I want to make sure to mention. I'm going to put into the chat a handout for everyone. This comes from we have a burnout prevention first aider certification. So that's where this comes from, just 2 pages. If you're interested in that, feel free to reach out. We also offer the clinical burnout inventory that's been used since like the 70s, that I can offer for free. So connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're interested in that, and I'm happy to share that with you. It does require you to spend 15 minutes with me to walk through the results, because I don't just want to send you off into the wilderness alone. So that kind of comes with it. And any last thoughts, Tina, before we kind of wrap up this session?
Oh, this is a great conversation. I appreciate it because it actually, I feel like I've overcome it, but it's always great to have these tools and these reminders of what's there and what I need to maybe identify and notice more, right? And to be sure that it doesn't happen again.
That's the part, is the prevention, right? And so, recovering from it, but you don't have to wait until you're broken. That's
That's
the
right.
last thing I will say on this topic.
And
All
I
right.
will say having a breakdown does not mean that you are broken. You've had a
Exactly.
breakdown.
No,
That's it.
exactly. Exactly. And look, here's two women who've been through it. We're on the other side. So you can too. Tina, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to come back in 3 minutes to talk about neurodivergence in HR with Sarah. And so we will see you all in 2 minutes. We'll see you all then.